guys need to stand in order. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Disruptive Innovation Summit. My name is Bob Gilbert. I'm the chair of the Fariborz Maseeh Department of Civil, Architectural, and Environmental Engineering here at the University of Texas at Austin. On behalf of our university, the United Engineering Foundation, and the Engineering Change Lab, I'm excited to kick off this summit. I would like to thank the organizers who are standing up here with me, Manish Kumar, Jerry Buckwalter, Don Roos, and Kyle Davey. In fact, I'd like to give them a round of applause. Thank you, gentlemen. I would like to thank Fariborz Maseeh, who's sitting right here, for investing in our university to help us lead the path forward for engineering and its role in society. I would like to thank Dick Wade for covering the cost of this event. I would like to thank the 9 incredibly talented speakers who are setting the stage for our discussions. I would like to thank the 8 professional facilitators who are volunteering their time because they are passionate about the topic and inspired by you, the participants. And I would like to thank all of you for coming to Austin, Texas to participate. It is an honor and a privilege to host so many bright and creative leaders. I look forward to listening and learning from your varied perspectives. Significant changes will be needed soon in how we provide water, energy, shelter, transportation, and waste management on Earth and beyond. Resource limitations, population growth, climate change, government upheaval, and technological advancements require transformative innovation. Transformation is inherently disruptive. It is our responsibility today to lead and shape that transformation. I look forward with you over the next 2 days to igniting sparks that help fuel our future. Jerry Buckwalter will now introduce our first speaker.
Okay, thank you, Bob. I've been designated to give you the most important information of the evening. The restrooms are right out that door to the left. And we're going to jump right into it. We have a jam-packed set of sessions all day tomorrow and Thursday, but tonight we have a treat, and I'm going to just introduce our first presenter, who will talk about how to help governments, global leaders, investors, and communities navigate climate risks, restore ocean ecosystems, and build resilience in the face of disruption. The focus of protecting these ecosystems must change from designing for stability to designing for resilience. We, engineers, must make sure leaders and decision makers have the evidence, strategy, and perspective they need to make decisions. This requires partnerships with investors, developers, governments, and NGOs. One in particular, OceanShot, is rebuilding the ecosystems that protect coastlines, create habitat, provide a return on investment, and show the world what's possible when innovation, science, nature, governance, and business align. Deborah Brosnan is an ocean scientist and a systems strategist designing nature-based infrastructure for resilience, biodiversity, and risk reduction. As the founder of Deborah Brosnan and Associates and co-creator of OceanShot, she works with sovereign leaders and institutional heads, as well as engineers, planners, and architects. We are treated to have her with us tonight, and for me, meeting Deborah has brought an extra personal benefit. When I went to impress someone now, I simply say, I know someone who has King Charles on speed dial. Deborah, it's been delightful to get to know you. The floor is yours, and we'll launch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I'll just call Chuck. Do I have a clicker? Or Suzanne? Great, thank you. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. I'm going to walk you through a journey describing what Jerry just talked about. How do we get from engineering or science to actually making change and creating innovation? So tonight, using Ocean Shot, I'm going to walk you through what that looks like. As soon as I figure out the clicker. There we go. And what I want to talk about is why integration is innovation and reimagining coastal resilience. I was, a number of years ago, diving off the coast of Montserrat, studying coral reefs, when a volcano blew up on us. This is the eruption. Ash came down into the water, down onto the reef, down onto me, and all I could do was watch a beautiful blue ocean turn into night. Some corals died instantly, others survived a while, and still more made it through. The resilient ones survived for the long term. That was the science. It was extraordinary, and I got to document it. But as it turns out, that isn't enough. I've spent my life as a marine scientist, from growing up in the west of Ireland, looking at tide pools turning over rocks to see what was under them. I have studied hurricanes. I have gone to sea. I have given testimony before the Congress on science. I can tell you with data why a reef dies, why corals are resilient, which ones aren't resilient. And none of it was restoring corals or sustaining the marine ecosystems on which all of us here depend. What I realized was, can I go back on this? Back is, which way? The red, okay. What I realized was that going deeper into our own fields does not actually allow us to innovate. Instead, we have to go across, and that's what I want to talk about this evening. So, going deeper makes you better in your field. Going across makes you different. And different is where the breakthroughs happen and where the innovation happens. Now, I'd like to tell you what that, first of all, feels like when you come across that in the first time. And that is, a few years ago, I was sitting opposite a politician. He was a very good politician, meaning he kept getting reelected. He was interested in oceans and public health, because his constituents were interested in oceans and public health. And I sat with him and I explained the science of water quality. Ivy League science done by Ivy League researchers. When do you close a beach in order to protect people from contamination? I was giving him everything he needed to make that decision. And he looked at me and he said, if I close that beach on a hot day, 25 million people will have nowhere to go. There may be riots, there will be crime, and I will not get reelected. I have to say I had no comeback, unusual for an Irish woman. And he wasn't dismissing the science. He was explaining to me that the science was not enough. I didn't understand his map. He lived in a world where the currency is re-election. And unless you get re-elected, you cannot do anything. And so risk is priced very differently. And that really changed me because I realized I was not solving his problem, I was describing it. And after that, I began to look at how do I start to listen to how other people see the problems that I'm seeing? How do I look at how they value different things, different currencies? How does a developer look at nature? What side of the ledger does he put it on? How does a politician calculate science for re-election? And how is that science communicated? How does an investor look at return on investment in relation to nature? How does a sovereign view a coastline? Not through the lens of ecology, but through legacy, through jobs, through environment. And that is when I started to learn and started to listen, and that started Ocean Shot. So let me tell you now a little bit about OceanShot, which is a nature-based coastal resilience platform. But let me tell you how it came about. I was standing on a beach in Sri Lanka with a number of fishermen. A tsunami had just gone through the area, a devastating tsunami. In front of us was the reef, the ocean with the reef, an intact reef, as you can see. Behind us, the first row of homes had been damaged by the waves that came ashore, but they were standing. Behind that, the rest of the houses were fine. And people were still alive, damaged, a lot of damage to property, but still alive. 2 miles up the coast, in another area, the same wave had come ashore, but the reef had been mined, completely mined for construction industry. And those waves that came ashore came 1.5 miles inland, and over 2,000 people were killed. Same shore, same wave, same day. The only difference was the presence of that reef. Now, that's not observation. That is backed up by hydrodynamic analysis, by coastal engineering, and by ecological science. The thing that made the difference was the presence or the absence of a reef. And so as I stood on that beach, I thought to myself, wow, that is so clear. That is obvious, and yet this is not how we build. We do not build for nature. We do not build for resilience. We do not build for the protection of people and for nature. And that led me to several initiatives, one of which is OceanShot. And OceanShot is you're looking at one of them here. OceanShot is a nature-based platform, a resilience platform. It operates at scale with private capital. It designs reefs that marine life recognizes as a home, as a habitat, and for coastal protection. It is not a research project. It is not philanthropy. It is natural infrastructure. We are designing and building natural infrastructure. And the reason I can use that word is because I stood on the beach, we saw the science, we looked at the engineering, and we put it together and we said, let's do something. And it exists because of that. So as OceanShot has continued to grow and evolve, it's taken me into different rooms, which I will go through with you a little bit. One being invited by King Charles to visit him at Buckingham Palace to talk about how nature brings resilience, nature in the value chain, and then to take that idea and to start to scale it into other parts of the Commonwealth and beyond. That didn't come from data. That came from being willing to look at other people's maps and other people's way of looking at the world. And that is one of the key areas. Now I want to go to another one. This is John Paul DeJoria. Many of you here may already know him. He lives in Austin, Texas. He is a businessman, an environmentalist, a humanitarian. He is the co-founder of Paul Mitchell Salon and Patron Tequila. He's also my partner in OceanShot. And when I met John Paul first, we talked a lot about the reefs, and we talked about the oceans, and we talked about the state of the oceans. And I spoke to him about reefs being natural infrastructure. And he got it immediately, but he got it through a different set of lenses. He hasn't invested in corals. What he's invested in is what those reefs protect. They protect his investment along the coast. They protect the communities that rely on those coastal systems for fisheries, for jobs, that have lived there for over 300 years. And his investment expands the humanitarian and the environmental, but also the business case for why we invest in nature and why we can make the changes that we do. And John Paul, by the way, is an amazing character if you have not looked into him very much. He's got an incredible story, which is coming out in a book, of how he went from homeless to where he is today. So what did we build? Well, I just want to give you a view of what it looks like with OceanShot. We looked at nature, and we said, nature, tell us, what does a reef look like? What does the structure look like that will provide this sort of coastal resilience and the biodiversity? And this was one of our very first, actually our very first deployment off Antigua and Barbuda. And once we put them in, we seeded them with a little bit of coral. And one of our measures of success is not what do we think about it, but does the marine life come and say, wow, that looks like home? And in fact, it does. And within 6 months, we have 37 species of fish living on these built reefs. Now, since then, we've done several other deployments, and all with the same story, and we're doing more and bigger as we go forward. But I'd like now to introduce you to the developer. And I've worked with many developers, and one particular developer who was building a development on the coast. And he said to me, I really want to have my development right on the beach. In fact, he really wanted his development so far that if you walked out the door, you'd put your toes in the water. And he explained it to me that every foot you push me back costs me thousands of dollars. And I thought about it and thought, well, I can explain to him about biodiversity, about natural vegetation on dunes, but none of that would have resonated. And finally, I said, great. So as we rebuild your reefs and your dunes, every foot of beach we create for you, and we will create a foot of beach, is worth thousands of dollars to you. This project is going to give you thousands of dollars. It is going to make your development more resilient. It is going to make people want to buy there. We changed the conversation. We did not change the science. I did not change my priorities. He certainly did not change his priorities. But the point is that it was not the breakthrough was not the reef. The breakthrough was being able to come together with different priorities and find a solution that worked for both. And that is the key in how we are moving forward. Now let's go to government. This is Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Honorable Gaston Browne. And Gaston Browne was there when we were putting in our original reefs and talking about the value of nature and nature in the value chain. And he's now created an area of coastline in Antigua devoted to ocean shot in a place called Peace Beach, designed for peace. And again, looking at natural infrastructure at nature, not in the sense of purely biodiversity, but simply as a way of creating resilience for the community, creating jobs, and creating a lifestyle for the community that is based on nature and based on a beautiful surrounding. So government becomes involved, government sees the value, and then government acts. And that is what we're doing. And I'm going to leave you with one new thing that we've just started, which is we just broke ground on our Ocean Innovation Lab, focusing on ocean shot and reef restoration. And the idea here is that we have local people, local naturalists who are working for us, and we've got scientists. And if we bring them together, again, the magic happens in terms of innovation. So that just happened and just broke ground. So now I want to switch gear a little bit and give you some of the reality. None of this happened on its own, in the sense of engineering alone could not have done this. Science alone could not have done this. Economics alone could not have done this, nor could policy. What made all of this happen was when you brought it all together and created a path forward. And when I say integration is the innovation, this is what I'm talking about. The willingness to be able to step out of your zone of comfort and create the systems that will allow you to change, allow you to transform systems that exist. So integration is the innovation. Now the reality, if I said that this was easy to do, or if it sounds easy, it is not. Integration, innovation is hard, but it's hard in a different way. It's not hard in the way that science is hard. It's not hard in the way that engineering is hard. Engineering is hard in terms of you're looking at calculus, load tolerances, data analysis, the kind of hard that you've been trained to do. When you step into the world to be an innovator or an integrator, you step out of that comfort zone. Now, all of you here are used to being the experts in the room. You spent a long time building up your credibility. And when you step into that world, you've got to be more than just that. Now, there's one question all of you can answer here pretty quickly, because I know I spoke to many of you tonight. What is it that you are? What is it that you do? I'm an assistant professor. I'm an engineer. I'm a vice president. I'm a policymaker. When you start to integrate and innovate, the answer to that question becomes really complicated. Because you'll always be an engineer, or you'll always be a scientist, but no longer just one thing, and that's not enough. And it can get very uncomfortable being in a room where you are not just the expert that you used to be, where you felt very comfortable being that technical expert, but where you are actually more than that. And you will become more than that. And that is where a lot of people feel so uncomfortable that they step away rather than moving forward. Because it is that willingness to be uncomfortable, to step outside of your comfort zone, to listen, to learn other people's maps, to figure out how things could be done differently, and to risk, in a way, to risk your identity, to risk the credibility that you've built up for a long period of time in order to change not just yourself, but to change the world that you want to be in. Now, we are definitely in a time of disruption. And the next decade, in fact, the future, is not going to need better experts. It's going to need people who are willing to cross boundaries. It's going to need people who are willing to operate in lanes that maybe they were told not to operate in order to be able to make those transformations and those new breakthroughs that we need to have. Now, in the next couple of days, we're going to be talking about innovation. We're going to be talking about new ways of doing things. We're going to be talking about being outside of our comfort zone. So I'd like you all to do one thing for me tonight. I would like you to turn to the person next to you, whether you know them or not, and I would like you to tell them the one thing, the one question you've been dying to ask, or the one thing you've been thinking you'd like to do, but you've held back a little bit on, or the thing that you will say tomorrow, not should say, or might say, or should not say, but the thing you will do tomorrow, the one thing. So do that right now. Don't think about it. Don't explain it. Don't justify it. What is that one thing? Okay. All right, everybody. We will continue the conversation tomorrow.
We just lost control of the crowd.
We did, but that's okay. Okay, everybody. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to come and find some of you who do things that I don't do, who know things that I don't know, who see the world very differently from me. And I'm going to ask you questions that I don't know so that you can answer. So the next decade belongs to those who have the willingness to step outside their comfort zone and the courage to persevere and the ability to make things different. I think all of you here are those kind of people. So I can't wait to see what we do in the next 2 days or what you all do in the future. Thank you so much.
We finished in great time. I'm going to pause right here for some questions right on the floor for Deborah. Right over here.
I'm interested in the engineering of the coral, like how exactly is it produced and shaped?
For the stream.
It's a long, I'll answer you, it is a longer answer. Tomorrow I'll explain to you kind of how we design it, but we design it to mimic what a natural reef in that area would look like. But I'll follow up with you tomorrow. Yeah, because it's a long question. Yeah.
Sorry, I sprung that on you too fast, though. Let's go one more question right here. Wait for the mic to come.
So snorkeling is my favorite thing in the world, and I'm wondering how well you think that we'll be able to preserve that experience for others or future generations.
Right now, coral reefs are definitely in trouble. Natural reefs are in trouble in the sense that there's been a lot of bleaching around the world, high temperatures, And not only are we losing corals, but we're losing the adult population. And I think Tom Chi told me we lose more corals in a day than we can currently restore in a decade. And that's the challenge. What we're doing here is we're building the habitat, because the habitat takes hundreds of years to build. And meantime, there's some very good scientists who are working on creating resilient corals. And we have a home for them when they're there.
Acidification of the oceans, are you
Yeah,
at
it
all
is.
optimistic?
It is a big issue. And we're seeing it with a lot of the calcium carbonate type animals. And it varies. Some are suffering quite a lot. Others are doing okay. How it's all going to play out is going to be, we don't know yet, but it is definitely a big issue. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Rob
Hi.
Mueller with NASA. What do you think satellite observation can do to help in your cause?
I think satellite observation is fantastic. And so I'm going to, remember I said I was going to ask a question tomorrow? You're the guy. Satellite observation could be amazing because satellite observation allows us to be able to look at coastal zones. And I know NASA's been doing some amazing work being able to look underwater and being able to actually see parts of the world that are very difficult to get to. We work in a lot of small island developing states where there's not a lot of resources and not a lot of people. And remote sensing, satellite work, is vital. I think we're not using it enough. And I think we can do a lot more with it. It will help us see where the vulnerable areas are. It will help us ask questions that we don't even know we need to ask yet. So quite a lot.
Just two more questions, one in the back.
Mark Hoyt from NC State University. I was intrigued by your challenge about the question. And my question is, how do you get those of us who tend to be analytical, want to know the how, to move into the why and get people to listen and understand stories to change viewpoints?
I think you said to get them to understand the why.
To understand more of the why and to listen and to learn to tell stories to get people to understand the bigger issues.
I think we're all storytellers. I think we all, if you go out for dinner with people, you tell stories. And I think one of the things we've lost often as scientists is that we focus so much on the data and the how that we forget to reintegrate the part of us that when we were kids used to tell the stories that got us to do what we used to do. And going back to that person that you were, and being able to tell that story to people, that's what will engage people. The why, the magic of it, the wonder of it, and then you can start to get into the how, because then they'll be intrigued. As scientists, we always talk first about the how and the data.
Sure. Hi, I'm Shirley Clark, and I live in the Chesapeake Bay Basin. And so one of the challenges we've got, and I'm thinking about this because you're sitting in a room of technical people here, is how do we also think about, as we're starting to see the Atlantic fisheries either moving north or moving deeper, the changing climate is going to kill a lot of coastal fisheries areas in terms of what's been done. How do we as technical people also help either tell the story or learn about the story so that we can be effective advocates for the people who are not going to be able to fish any longer?
So I think the science is pretty good around that, of what's happening. And oddly enough, I think if you go down, I've worked in that part of the world. Actually did a project on coastal resilience down there. And a lot of the fishermen, a lot of the local community is very aware of the fact that you're seeing these changes, that the fish are disappearing. And fear is a big driver. So they will not say to you, yeah, it's climate or whatever. But I think if you start to meet them where they are and say, look, we're seeing changes in your fisheries, this is what we think are going to happen, and bring them in to working with you on the solution. This is what we're seeing in terms of a loss of fish. Fish are moving north. How do you think we're going to fix this? And if you ask them the how, you'd be surprised at how many answers come back that make a lot of sense. And just having those conversations, because they know their catches are going down. They know the catches are not going back. They know the beaches are disappearing. and they'll tell you. Yeah.
Okay, we'll take one more, and then be aware, Deborah will be around for questions after the speaker as well. Go ahead.
Could you tell us a story? I'm right here. Could you tell us a story about how a good conversation or type of dialogue went when you had to convene several different stakeholders in the implementation of Ocean Shot?
Yes. I can tell you many stories of it. Some good, some wonderful, some very challenging. And I'll tell you the challenging story because that's the most difficult. The most challenging was to work with people in what I would call the development industry, who are doing development along the coastal zone, and who have in the back of their mind the idea that the environment is a cost, and that scientists who work in the environment are a bit of a problem. And that is how they walk into the room. And so when you walk into that attitude, when I said it's about integration, and the discomfort of it, they're looking at you often as an environmentalist who is there to stop them and who doesn't understand their world. And the way you change it is by listening to what they're saying. And this really did happen. And the story of the developer wanting to be right on the beach and losing the coastal zone, when you start to explain that this area is disappearing, the beaches are disappearing because the reefs have been lost, and you start to gradually show the data. But it's more than one conversation. It's a matter of building up trust. And trust is the most important thing, trust and credibility. And that takes time. It means showing up. It means showing up with people you wouldn't normally show up to talk to. And it means spending time with people who don't share your priorities, particularly people who can make decisions. And building trust, credibility, changes how people see the world and changes how people do things. And that happens time and time again. It is a process. It's why I think the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda is investing in coastal resilience, because we've spent enough time, he's seen the outcome, and now there's a trust that's built up. I can tell you many stories. Some of these meetings take place in rooms like this, in boardrooms, and others take place in the pub. And that's probably the best place to do it. No cell phones, no, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Deborah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yep, I'll let you get to that. Okay, we've heard about solutions for small island nations to multi-billion-dollar sustainable developments. But they also apply to disaster-prone urban coastlines like New York City. Our second presenter will talk about efforts to meet the challenges of at-risk urban coastal communities, learning from what's been done in the Netherlands to what's being done in New York City. His presentation will force us to ask the same question. Are we up for the challenge of high stakes and large complex projects, finding ways to turn risks to opportunities and creating solutions that enhance resilience and sustainability for today's and future conditions? Edgar Westerhof is Senior Vice President and the U.S. Director for Climate Adaptation with Arcadis. Edgar is a water management engineer specializing in international integrated urban water management. Following his move to the United States from the Netherlands, Edgar led the HUD Rebuild by Design competition, including the Big U plan for the protection of Lower Manhattan. Edgar is the contributing author of the books Blue Dunes and Adapting Cities to Sea Level Rise. Edgar and I met 7 years ago when we were part of a trio that was the judge and jury for a global innovation contest sponsored by the International Committee on Sustainable Infrastructure based in London. Edgar, welcome to Austin.
Yeah. Well, wonderful to be here. Thanks so much for the kind introduction. What convinced me actually, Jerry, to be here was you said we are going to ask ourselves, the tough questions. And I was like, Austin, I'd been here once before in 1996 with two of my best friends back then, still a student. And I was like, coming back here in Austin 30 years later, I'm wondering, like, what were the questions that they were asking themselves? Because I think they jumped straight to the answer. We are going to grow. It doesn't matter how. We are growing. And I saw this amazing, skyline, all these high-rise offices. I'm wondering, man, what happened to Austin? But it's pretty amazing. I think what I want to talk about a little bit more today is like, growing. How do we grow? Looking at our urban centers. This is a common, scene that we know from New York City. This was during COVID. I'm a big biker, of course, myself, coming from the Netherlands. This is how I like to move around. But you could tell it got a little sketchy after COVID when people were leaving the subway. They didn't trust the subway to commute to their work. And they started to take bikes. And you saw this, innovation in how people are moving around through the city with, all kinds of scooters. And it was a little tough at times. This is, of course, for me, this is nothing. This is what I'm used to. This is, I would say on a busy Saturday with a lot of bikes, what you can see in Amsterdam, people being squeezed in where they live, the beautiful canal houses, and then the canals, of course. Oftentimes there's nothing in between those canals and where you actually bike. So you've got to be a little bit careful on the weekend if you do this after a beer or two. But of course, there's much more to it. When we talk about, water management, engineering, it's hard to be humble with, these kind of visuals. But here, of course, you can ask yourself the question, what are we actually designing for? Who are we designing for, right? You saw the streetscape with the gazillion bikers, and then you see this beautiful yacht going from Amsterdam to the North Sea on a multi-million-dollar aqueduct. Forcing cars to dive under with growing groundwater pressure, with rising sea levels. This is tough. And again, infrastructure. Who are we doing this for? So as beautiful as it is as a water engineer, I think we may question these type of solutions in a few decades from now. Well, to the US, to Boston. I know we have Boston in the room. See two hands. David is in the room here. You suggested I would go full out when it comes to Boston. Well, of course, Boston is in a difficult circumstance. We all know that ground elevation is pretty low. You look at the Seaport District here, highly successful, a marvel in its own right. It has been developed over the past 20, 25 years. Used to be a parking lot before there was a lot of real infrastructure. But it's starting to see its challenges. 20 billion or more has been invested over the course of those 20 years, but water is creeping up on the waterfront edge, literally. These are two winter storms that happened in 2018, so-called 100-year storms. Two events that happened within 2 months. So people didn't care about those so-called once-in-a-100-year events because they saw them happen twice in 2 months. So it completely changed the way how we were at that time doing a study called Climate Ready Boston, because people didn't care about our so-called once-in-a-100-year. It was all about, that winter storm. And that winter storm is challenging because that winter storm can also bring, ice, floating ice, which, can function as a sledgehammer. Extremely complex, extremely difficult. So water creeping up on the waterfront edge is what a lot of cities will be facing, including Boston. And that time frame, that time horizon is narrowing, 15 to 20 years, and every high tide will bring water to that edge. The king tides, happens twice a year, will bring another 2 feet to that level. So it's already a recurring event happening pretty much, every year, twice a year, water, causing massive, massive disruption. So bringing that challenge to a place where I've spent a lot of time in my own engineering practice when I was still in the Netherlands. City of Rotterdam, metropolitan place, large, very successful as well. Water coming from 4 directions, from the North Sea to the right. It's hosting the biggest delta that we have in the Netherlands called the Rhine, which is coming straight through the city. Rain, also extreme rain events, groundwater pressure. So the solution had to encompass all of that. So integrated planning, water management, land management is effectively what we are talking about. And sometimes, when you hear about living with water, it's a bit about this beautification. It's almost like, like a romantic way to say, the Dutch are safe because we can live with water, we adopt, we embrace water. Well, that can be the case if you have the delta works. That can be the case if you have a once in a 10,000 year, level of protection, which allows that to thrive under, I would say, pretty much every given circumstance, definitely for the next 50 to 70 years. Well, integrated planning, here are a couple of examples on what that actually looks like. You see parking integrated into a dune landscape in Katwijk. If you happen to be in the Netherlands, this is definitely worth a visit. It's the only levee coastal protection system that is actually paying for itself. You can park up to 700 cars in this parking garage, so it's generating a lot of revenue. Multifunctionality in its early thinking, I would say. The benefit cost analysis, pretty strong. Also the image to the right, Roof Park in Rotterdam. This used to be a struggling neighborhood. Well, we used the necessity to upgrade the protection system with a levee, but at the same time a shopping mall integrated in that levee, a beautiful park on top of that solution. And it changed the entire neighborhood around from a struggling area to a place where people thrive and where people want to be. Urban floodplains, water storage under normal circumstances, it's a beautiful park, but when it rains, it can fill up with water without causing any disruption to the local community on both sides. A high-end solution in its own way. To more hybrid, I would say, living forms, people who are living on the water. But that is something, we have to reassess, as a result of extreme rains, that Rhine Delta that I talked about. Extreme events happen more and more often. We've seen this, these images from 3 years ago with the big deluge in Germany, Belgium, which killed around 250 people. No one in the Netherlands got killed, but it was a close call. Water was again at the tip of the levee. And it's forcing us to reassess the delta, not just looking at the large streams, but also the smaller tributaries. Make them part of your model and get a much bigger, broader, comprehensive understanding of what you're actually dealing with. And that is the room for the river 2.0, you can say. So we have room for the river. That saved us from the floods that we've seen in Germany. But we also know that adaptation doesn't end with that plan that we now have. We constantly need to upgrade the plan that we have, and that is what you are seeing here. This plan is being adjusted as we speak, not in the least because of a recent so-called stress test that the Dutch government launched. Deltares was part of that study. 8 inches of rain, 48 hours. Well, 8 inches of rain, I would say nothing unique for the US. We've seen these type of events a lot. We've seen Harvey, 45 inches. Also in Florida, 10 inches is nothing new. 8 inches, and you see 60% of the Netherlands disappear underwater. So that is a wake-up call. Again, like how do we build, for example? There's a massive housing program. We need to build a lot of houses in the Netherlands. But how do we do that through this lens of the possibility of 8 inches of rain? And this stress test was not just about the Netherlands. This was a collaboration with Germany. Germany, who is also upgrading their water system, which is great for the Germans, but it also means that water probably is going to flush into the Netherlands more quickly. So we are getting another load of water that we didn't take into consideration a decade ago, for example. So we are reassessing these type of modeling efforts. Serious gaming is becoming more common as a tool to do that, help planners understand what the implications of an extreme event is. Well, back to my own hometown. I've been in New York almost longer than I've been in the Netherlands now, 14 years. I came just before Hurricane Sandy hit New York City, hit Manhattan very hard. I biked through the city just hours before the hurricane hit to see the next day the massive, massive disruption. The hours before I saw like, man, heavens, what is going on? No one is actually preparing for what is to come. And I've been talking about this. I was not working for Arcadis at that time, but I was talking to a lot of people in the city. like explaining how irresponsible it is to have the ocean there and your city there and nothing in between. As a Dutch engineer, that is a bad, bad thing. And well, then of course this happened, and we saw the disruption. We also saw something that was new to New York, interdependency, how it all interrelates. How power is generating elevators, how people couldn't get into their beautiful high-rise apartments if you live at the 40th floor. How do you get your groceries up? That is really challenging. Not to talk about the subway system or the tunnels. Everything powered by electricity was out. No internet. Wall Street, of course, is then a notorious newsmaker making the headlines. One day, Wall Street is approximately 1 billion in direct economic loss. Well, they were disrupted for several days. All of that triggered a tremendous response. A response following this type of devastation. This is in the Rockaways. You see how the infrastructure is being completely disrupted. And social disruption. And I think this triggered the word resilience. Before Sandy, there wasn't much talk about resilience. Resilience, it was more about climate robust solutions. What do you do as a water engineer? Well, you want to make it robust. You want to make it able to sustain extreme events. Well, then resilience came, and resilience was very much explained through how communities need to work together. Grassroots, build it up. And an important response was through Rebuild by Design, the competition that I had the honor to lead on behalf of Arcadis. This was the winning concept, the Big U. We collaborated with the Bjarke Ingels group, Bjarke Ingels, star architect from Denmark. One architecture, Matthijs Bouw, was involved in that team. And we came up with a plan to protect Manhattan. And you would say now, well, that is a no-brainer. It's a beautiful peninsula, you build a levee around that. But at that time, when we started to have those first early conversations, people were staring at us like, oh my heavens, are we really going to build a wall in between the water and where we live, and we cannot see the water anymore, and this is a working waterfront? That's not possible. So we really had to reinvent the wheel, talking about what we are doing in a city like Rotterdam. How do you bring social infrastructure to what was explained previously as physical infrastructure? How do you double these two? I will show you a couple of examples, but I would like to explain that through the lens of what the American Society of Civil Engineers is doing through their updated standard 7323. We have high hopes it's coming out after the summer. We have finished our writing, so keep an eye on this one, because this is touching on all the hot topics that in essence make the big U the big U. And I want to explain a couple of them. Sustainability leadership, I've underlined, I'm not going through all of them, but leveraging innovation, always try to seek innovation in any project that you encounter. Economic social value, the BCA, the social aspect to that, how do you quantify those numbers? Right now that is a common practice, but when we started doing this back in 2013, it was all new. There was no BCA. We knew about the solutions, but we've never married those two together, let alone the engagement that we went through. We didn't do that. So what the ASCE is trying through that standard is incorporate that into a new paradigm that engineers will be working with and planners in support of them. What we did for the big U was very much also designing the process. It was, as I mentioned, it was not about the solution so much. It was very much about asking ourselves the questions. How do we get from that abstract ambition to a certain outcome? What challenges do we anticipate? How do we mitigate all those challenges? So we spent countless hours, a year and a half, many weekends, evening pizza boxes. When you went to a bar, we went to eat pizza and have conversations. But at the end of the day, you come back and you have, you start to grow a plan with the community. That is how it happened. But also a plan grounded in science. And we brought those numbers in early on. And what you see here, that dotted line in the middle, 4 feet, that is the lowest point in Manhattan. And you see how water with high tides is slowly creeping up, to break the waterfront edge around the year 2040, 2050. But also here, higher tides can bring water into the city much earlier. So we brought that science in early on. Also, recognizing our stakeholders are changing all the time. So their grassroots, very important, go out to schools and explain to kids what this actually means. And have a kid stand next to that dotted line, 6 feet. That is what we will encounter, in 60, 70 years maybe from now. Maybe if that growth goes, gradually, but it may also give us a hike, who knows. So talking to kids, very important. Talking about these concepts, from concept to realization, that is now, what is so fantastic. And I regret not including a photo of our king, King Alexander from the Netherlands. He has visited this site twice now. He's a water expert by himself, and he's asking also all the tough questions, which in Miami 2 weeks ago was all about insurance. Here it was all about how New Yorkers are so tough to deal with, stakeholder engagement. So for us that was quite fascinating. But being able to show how concepts come to life, that is what this is about. Not just beautiful elevated landscape parks, but also massive floodgates, New Orleans style doors, that you can close. Actually, you can close them with just one person. We're not saying that too loud, because if you unlock it, you can just close it by one person if you want to. These kind of areas, East River Park. Also here, just look at a couple of these aspects that are taken into consideration. Connectivity, a very important one. People were complaining lack of access to the waterfront. So when we were redoing this park, there was quite a bit of resistance, let's call it fear, for the demolition of the park, East River Park. We had full-grown trees. Robert Moses, he developed this decades ago to find a park now with these beautiful trees. And we had to cut it all and raise the park with 10 feet, barging in all that sand. To where we are now, it has been given back to the community, and they love it. They start really to enjoy what they see, starting to see the value of a plan like this. But don't get me wrong, this is taking 120,000 people out of the floodplain. Once it's certified by FEMA, people don't have to pay flood insurance anymore. So cities like Boston, they keep a close eye on what is happening in New York, because this is going to be a game changer, also for a city like Miami or all along the Texas Gulf. This is what is going to drive a big change, quality of life outcomes. Well, just touching on one engineering aspect here, adaptive design. Also that 15 years ago didn't really exist. But what we are doing for the Big U is design for the once in 100 year in the year 2070. So in 50 years from now, this will still function up to that once in 100 year level of protection. If need be, we can also raise the bar. We can add another 2 feet on top of these walls. So adaptive design is part of that thinking. Financial district, this master plan is going to 60% design. Collaboration also here with the US Army Corps of Engineers. Hopefully funding will find its way, because effectively this is the second phase of the Big U. The third phase is already happening, is being constructed. That is the progressive design build program that is happening on the west side, Battery Park City. Highly complex in its own way. So just a couple of examples. I touched on the Netherlands, touched on New York City, and well, this of course, East River Park, it has its own postcard. I would say this doesn't qualify yet for a postcard, because New York, as much as we talk about the Big U, the big engineering that is happening, we also have these Bay Islands, and what do we do with them? What do we do with the Rockaways? What is their story? And the city is starting to explore the topic of retreat, repurposing, more and more, which is still, I would say, a bit of an internal conversation within the city agencies. But we need to call a spade, grab the bull by the horns here in Texas. This requires a conversation that is honest, brutally honest, just like a rebuild by design. You are getting a levy. Well, in 50 years from now, this may not be an area where we can support all the functionality that you currently have. And this may well be an area where nature will take over. Who knows? And how do we do that? How do we leave it in such a way that nature actually can take over in a way that is sustainable? Well, nothing new, nothing unique. I would like to end with this one, a similar sustainability question. We may also run out of water in places like Austin. And with that, I would like to give it back to Jerry. Thank you. Yeah.
Recognizes the time. time, I'm going to open it for just 2-3 questions because then we are here till 9 if you want to mill around and ask everybody more questions, but I'll take just a few. There's one right up here first.
Please wait for the mic. Can you, so we here in Texas have experiencing when we talk about water sources, create water, bring water to community, different kind of water. We actually want water here. It takes a long time to plan for not engineering reason, actually, right? So the horizon for these water conversations is decades, not years. The kind of project you're talking about are similar. I think the silver lining is the, Sandy Storm accelerate some of that conversation and open up a lot of acceptance to those things. So can you talk about what are the horizon for some of the project you planning on? And if it is decades, how do you merge with the fact that political cycles are 2 years, 4 years, maybe 8 years, and how to plan for that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, and I think a lot of tomorrow will be about governance, about process. How do we accelerate? Be fast, because all of these examples, including the Netherlands, everything takes a decade. Nothing goes fast. It doesn't matter where you are. So I would say when it comes to Austin, or I was hearing examples, Corpus Christi, water, Phoenix, nothing is new. But being prepared, at least understanding your risk as a governance leader, bringing also the private sector into play. So you have a shared, pool of responsibility, and being able to address that together. Having that capacity building in place, because if that is not in place, if that early thinking is not there, you are in trouble. If then an extreme event hits, then yes, you have a window of opportunity, which in New York was about 2 years, but you will run out of that window. And then, so being prepared, luckily, is what many regions are doing. So I would say embrace any disaster that you have, and work with it. Try to build that capacity and get that consensus on where you need to be, including stress tests that you may not have foreseen. If you've been planning for flash floods, bringing 10 inches, well, double it, make it 20, and see what happens to your downtown area. That is the kind of reality check that we need everywhere in the U.S.
Question right in front of you, and then one more over here.
I cannot resist from asking an engineering question. Was there any simulations or testing that led to this, either in the Netherlands or in the US? Can you tell us about that?
Well, simulations, of course, there's always a lot of modeling. If that is your question, there's always a lot of modeling happening. So we try to predict the future, and we spend, billions. So you better make sure that whatever we design, including that adaptive process where there's indeed a gray zone where we are not fully sure, what that future in 2070, 50 years from now is going to be. Yeah, there's uncertainty, but that is, I think, also where that future of AI is going to help us to predict that in more detail. Capacity building, that kind of futuristic thinking. We will be better and better in doing that. Just a quick example on Europe. On the Netherlands, the Dutch were laughing when the Belgians were actually first to model their country through AI, and the Dutch were like, but now the Dutch are doing it themselves. And that's going to be our future. And while we are now discussing including small tributaries in your streams, which is also very relevant for Western Texas, which has faced that flooding, well, in 5 years from now, it will be at the tip of our fingers likely. So there's great benefit we can take in these kind of digital innovations and working with digital twins, overlaid in our urban centers on what the implications are. So technique is going to help us. We still need to talk to people. So without capacity building, there's no solution. It's also very simple.
And there's one more question right here.
Thank you. So I loved one of the examples you showed. I think it was in Rotterdam, of an area that was, typically meant for recreation, that is also designed to flood. That was a big component of the Big U as well. And I love those multi-solution-oriented approaches. I found myself living in Houston when Harvey hit. My background's in public health, and I had not considered previously the risks that come with that sometimes as well, especially in a place like Houston where there's industrial uses upstream, and there was toxic soil in playgrounds. And so I'm wondering, in your experience, other than doing robust testing after an extreme weather event, are there other design factors that could go into how to ensure safe human use, recreational use of spaces after extreme weather?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we've seen also definitely after COVID, a new appreciation of open space. And I've been surprised twice while being in New York past 14 years. First was Sandy, and then seeing these pop-up hospitals in Central Park. I would have never imagined that would happen, because we used to have Roosevelt Island with that hospital there, where we brought all the people 100 years ago, but that was no longer there. So how do you do that? Well, Central Park, that beautiful lung in our city. So that appreciation of open space, I think, is also informing what we do and how we value existing infrastructure, maybe under a lens of retreat. So I think it's becoming more and more a conversation about how much infrastructure do we actually need, and make that a much tighter conversation. So rather than investing, building out, making more infrastructure, it is about de-investment, and de-investment not meaning giving up, but reassessing what we actually need and trimming down in places where it's too much. And I think parks are, a number one example in that regard. There's a lot of opportunity that comes with parks, including urban gardening, which we barely do. So no, it's a great observation. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Edgar, very much. Okay. Today you heard about water. Tomorrow we'll be dealing with land, although some of it won't be on this planet. Today you've heard from the Dutch and the Irish. Tomorrow you'll hear from the Americans. It's just a great start. We've had time for some questions. Tomorrow we'll start a whole new format. The presentations will be equally short, and we'll be driving right into teams to question, debate, ask ourselves questions, and brainstorm. So it'll be a very different format tomorrow. Get your sleep tonight. Be ready for it. We'll need everyone's mental capacity. With that, thank you for coming tonight for the launch. Thank you to our two speakers. They've been great to get us started with a special treat. And we're done for tonight. You're free to hang out and talk to each other. And tomorrow we start at 7:30 for breakfast if you're interested. I've been promised the doors will actually be unlocked this time. And we start at 8:30. Okay. Fourth floor, right here, same building. It'll be set up with rounds. Same place. Did I miss anything else, Manish? We're good? We're good. Thank you.